Retro Future.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Bonsert of Radio Retro Future, and today I want to talk about the world building of Atomic Heart and its design. But first, please support our current Kickstarter for Bound for the Styx. Not only will you support the Association of Ishtar series, you'll also help this channel grow and the community. Just by donating a single dollar, you are entitled to our Kickstarter exclusive content, such as stories by our guests and ebooks. Now on with today's review. First off, this video turned out very differently than I had intended. For me, world building should be integrating in a writing process, as it depicts how characters interact with their surroundings. Therefore, I myself write the world as I write the adventures. That way I can use the world to its fullest potential. This is no different from video games. Imagine Mario without platforming or Doom without enemies to shoot. And that brings us to today's subject, Atomic Heart. A wonderful setting, but not optimized for the game that they wanted it to be. Overall, Atomic Heart's design might be some of the more memorable ones of the last few years. Even its detractors praise it for its attention to detail, ranging from its use of historical propaganda posters to references to Slavic pop culture and retro futurism. Even locations like air ducts stands out from their competitors. Sure, it has its amount of Bioshock clichés like upgrade stations, cameras, environmental puzzles. Fortunately, these are original enough to stand on their own, unlike another game I reviewed, Too Close to the Sun. Not only is its environment repetitive, it just screams Bioshock inspirations at you. To a point it's getting distracting, and I did not feel that when I was playing Atomic Heart. Unfortunately, it could have taken some more hints from Bioshock, and especially Prey, which, quite frankly, I think this game reminds me more of Prey than it does of Bioshock. But what makes those games so wonderful is that their setting engages you with the gameplay non-stop, so you feel immersed in the environment. You can weaponize your surroundings, like by setting off explosive objects, electrifying water, and turning security systems against your enemies. You can even control Big Daddies in the Bioshock series. There are no such objects in Atomic Heart. In some way, you really get a sense that everything in this world is trying to kill you, but its implementation is lacking, and that becomes most obvious in its open world sections that allow for some stealth-like gameplay, but stealth is very underdeveloped in both gameplay and world design. There are no hiding places or sneak routes, just blind spots on the map's boundaries, which makes evading robots feel like you're exploiting their AI rather than engaging with the game's systems. Also, the world's design lacks functional landmarks to give you a sense of direction, like Metro Exodus or even Fallout 3. The first time I entered the surface world, I felt lost. Beyond my objective marker, I had no clue where to go. All I saw were trees and houses, and I felt more confused than curious. Especially at that moment, I felt like I was inside a game rather than an experience. For example, many did not enjoy Bioshock's hacking system because you felt like you were playing a different game, a pipe layer in Bioshock's case, that drew you out of the world. And that is probably one of Atomic Heart's most significant shortcomings, the inclusion of puzzles for puzzles' sake, especially the ones that have no practical application in the world's environment. I understand the rhythm-based puzzle and the dot combination lock, but how are ordinary people supposed to operate those relay-esque puzzles? And then there are tumbling puzzles that look more like hipster art projects than anything that belongs in a scientific facility. The game's dialogue emphasizes the over-engineered locks in this world. I know that some writers believe this is smart, but pointing out something is dumb doesn't make it clever or immune to criticism, okay? It's more like an acknowledgement you are intentionally wasting my time. And all of this leads to one of the most obvious questions. What were its designers trying to accomplish? Atomic Heart is a first-person shooter, sure, but it's just a mediocre one. They also want to encourage stealth, open world survival with environmental storytelling, and it just falls short in all of those. Good open world stealth. Make sure you have multiple routes to reach your objective, each with its own challenges and benefits. Atomic Heart is too linear for that, and the moment the AI sees you, it attacks, so your only real option is to fight your way through any challenge. Thus your gameplay loop is explore, fight and puzzle with occasional platforming sections, which should be a cardinal sin in first-person games. The same with the enemy placement. Atomic Heart's enemies variety is okay-ish, but most of it is a simple mix of enemies that attack you in melee or ranged. But I never needed to change tactics or equip specific weapons to fight them. There are no bruiser type enemies with devastating melee attacks, etc. They don't use the environment to their advantage either. Like, there is this mortar-like robot that fires at an arc, but it's deployed just as another ranged enemy. Never did I meet one firing at me from higher levels like the grenade splicers in BioShock did. And even though telekinesis is one of your basic abilities, I never felt I had to use it except for puzzles. Oh yeah, this game has its own variation of BioShock's Atom or plasmids. Here it's called Polymer. It's responsible for most of the advances in this world, and it also gives you superhuman abilities or plasmids. Does it matter? It's more like this world's version of the Force that can do whatever the plot requires, so yeah, it's just like Atom. Speaking of which, why are games like BioShock so hard to make? In BioShock, they develop the game mechanics and then they build a world and stories around them. Atomic Heart feels like they make the world first and then develop the mechanics later. So instead of creating an environment for players to use their abilities in, they created an environment with very little to do when it comes down right to it. The hallways and polymer tubes just lead you to one other puzzle area and then the next. And when it comes to environmental storytelling, I can be more positive. This is also the section I really wanted to write about, so let's discuss the setting of Atomic Heart. The story takes place in an alternate 1950s. The Soviet Union somehow becomes a technological utopia in which all labor and science is being conducted by robots. They're even selling robots in the truckloads to the United States. You play the role of a KGB agent B3, sent by his surrogate father, Dr. Sechenov, to Facility 3826, where research on space colonization is being conducted. They're also working on Collective 2.0, hardware that allows humans to connect to a hive mind. However, when P3 arrives at the facility, it turns out all the servant robots are running amok and killing all the humans they come across. Now you must hunt down the criminals responsible and stop the robots. So far, so BioShock. Yes, it's one of those. A character who doesn't know about his past, a utopia turned into a hellhole, science gone wrong, a magical serum that does everything from creating mutants to turning our protagonist into an X-Man. However, I am more likely to compare it to Prey due to the resource collecting and inventory management. All BioShock-inspired games start the same way, but Atomic Heart is probably the longest and most story-heavy I've played so far. In contrast, in BioShock you crash in the sea, enter a spooky lighthouse, get sent under the sea, then we get introduced to the city of Rapture, but the moment we enter the city proper we get attacked. In Atomic Heart it's a peaceful day, you're on a boat ride during festivities leading up to the launch of Collective 2.0. P3 talks to his polymer glove, Charles. He speaks to his surrogate father, Dr. Sechenov, who gives him a mission to take out a wanted criminal who was put to work at Facility 3826. And we get to see the fantastic architecture of this world, which is a mixture of colorful brutalism with some hints of Art Deco, and it looks amazing. In the meantime, we get a lot of lore, even if we did not ask for it. And it's all voiced as well. I mean, there is a lot of voice work, so much so the game has to interrupt itself to play them all. You can find voice recordings, but Charles is a chatty glove that allows P3 to collect resources like a vacuum cleaner and give him his special powers like shock and a freeze ray, but mostly he talks. He talks a lot. His monologues range from tutorial messages to reciting all of the world's lore. And oh, does Atomic Heart love to talk about its lore. Now, it's not bad, it's just not delivered very interestingly, which is a shame, because the game does have very interesting sci-fi themes going on, but instead of making us engage with these themes, we get to listen to corpses. Yes, really. People who are connected to Collective 2.0's consciousness become separate from their bodies. In other words, when they die, their minds linger in their collective connectors until it fades from existence. Some of these people are not aware they're dead, thinking they are trapped or living in some illusion that they're still alive. Others do and feel their bodies decompose as they lay there surrounded by the machines who killed them. I find this interesting, and there's obviously horror in there. Imagine your body being dead, but you are aware of everything that happens afterwards, like decomposing, being eaten alive, or getting buried. However, I have to pause the game to listen to what they have to say. The first one you come across tells you about a code, which is great. I have a reason to interact with him. And there's also a dead tour guide who asks you to look for a group. Interesting idea, but it doesn't lead to anything useful. Now, to elaborate, your opponents are robots that are supposed to be benign helpers, and yet they can be turned into remorseless killing machines at the flip of a switch. Now, in lesser sci-fi, this would be considered a given that any robot can be a killer. These robots shouldn't be able to perform martial arts, for example, and yet they do. The android lab assistants are just that, lab assistants, who can perform menial duties, but at the drop of a hat, they turn into WWF wrestlers who can shoot laser beams out of their faces. How is that possible? We'll get into that. But when it comes to the game's visual design, it's stunning. The enemies are very well animated, the architecture both looks Soviet and give you a antiquated science fiction feel. Every location has its own identity, although few are truly memorable, and that's more due to the overall design being good, but lacking some inspiration. For example, they recycled a lot of assets, like statues that, however, the interior halls genuinely look like exhibitions designed to enthrall visitors. There are unique vehicles and displays that reflect the obsolete and utopian vision of the future and its optimisms and belief in the state's ideology, but it also is a reflection of the story's themes. Isn't the Soviet Union the best place to live? Yes, its scientific achievements are unrivaled. That statement right there is the essence of the whole thing. The positivist worldview is that scientific progress is the most important measure of success. Why? Because of science, of course. Well, obviously the Soviet Union has greater ambitions as it seeks to colonize the solar system using bioengineered life forms and even technology. But in the end, all technology serves humanity's ambitions. Or does it? You see, the criminal you are chasing is actually one of the developers of Collective 2.0, but he was arrested after trying to sabotage the project. Now, in a communist utopia, anyone should be able to do his job. Soviet citizens are all equal, after all, but instead, the sentenced criminal is put back to work on Collective 2.0 because they desperately need him. Using scientists to work as forced labor is also a very Soviet thing to do. Regardless, this goes against the ideology's principle that suggests that some humans have more. However, the idea that some humans have more value than others, of course, goes against the party's principles. But just because you want things to be true, doesn't make them so. In that regard, it's interesting that P3 holds opposing beliefs. He believes in equality, but also assumes there needs to be somebody in charge. It also plays into his character that many consider to be that of a douchebag, where he's unwilling to believe what happens in front of his eyes. For example, when confronted with Collective 2.0's true purpose, he is disgusted, but he is unwilling to oppose its creator because of his loyalty to him. His master has more value than anybody else. Now, it's hard to say if he came to this conclusion by himself because, well, you probably already guessed it. P3 is programmed. As we learned, P3 and his wife were both KGB agents who were the target of a terrorist attack. His wife died, but P3 was saved by Sechenov, who then used him as his personal attack dogs. Like the robots P3 is fighting, he too is programmed to be a mindless killing machine. You see, these robots are not just built as a workforce. At the start I mentioned they were exported. Does it come together now? These robots have combat subroutines built into them to serve as a fifth column. All the hackers needed to do was activate the combat protocols, and thus the massacre began. As you can imagine, while P3 is chasing terrorists, party members are panicking because word got out that all of these robots are nothing more but wolves in sheep's clothing and start killing people around the world. Off screen, of course. P3, however, is no different. He too can be made to kill at the flip of a switch. He only learns this at the end of the story, after which I'll get to that later. That the game has such a big emphasis on the space stuff is probably no coincidence. In the West, we are well aware of how important the space race was for the US, but when you look for actual US propaganda from that period, there are few posters. Most stuff I could find were from science magazines. However, from the Soviet Union, this was the way to show off they could do what the US couldn't. Thus, they were massive campaigns promising they would take humanity to space. It's probably no coincidence Yuri Gagarin's first journey to space was mentioned in the start of Atomic Heart. It was supposed to be an achievement promising a new age of scientific progress, and in extension, Soviet progress. Collective 2.0 resembles that to some extent, but there is a darker history being referenced here. At least that's my personal belief. The problem with most ideologies is that all the answers must conform to set ideology. This is a science-based social system set up by a small group of people who are convinced to know better than anyone else. This would lead to what some call scientism, the belief that the people wearing white lab coats can't be wrong, and yes, that is a thing. In this case, science is just a word used by those in authority to justify their policies. This is known as Lysenkoism, in which case pseudoscience serves as a means to enforce the state doctrine. The agricultural revolution led to the starvation of millions of Soviet citizens, and later in Maoist China during the so-called Great Leap Forward. These disasters were of course swept under the rug, and the regime bribed hundreds of foreign correspondents to ensure the Western countries never found them out. I'm not saying that Atomic Heart was inspired by Stalin's reign. I'm just saying that the Russians have a complicated relationship with science-inspired policy. Many because that policy served the ambitions of a handful of influential people, and powerful people want valuable followers. And this is where our protagonist comes in. P3 is a true believer in authoritarian communism, but he obeys Dr. Sechenov above all, convinced he can do no wrong. Dr. Sechenov saved him, after all. Atomic Heart explores the complicated relationship that the Russians had with the system, especially those who believed their leaders could do no wrong and that the rebellion was an unforgivable sin. But Atomic Heart isn't just about blind belief in communism. It is the fetishization in technology and progress. To illustrate, the world's design is filled with suggestive imagery, from suggestively posed mannequins that look male but have breasts for some reason, the latex dresses for tour guide robots whose faces somewhat remind me of blow-up dolls, the oval patterns on doors and pickable locks, the stroking movements of random machinery, the voluptuously shaped ballerina robots, and then of course Nora, the hoary repair machine, who also happened to be very dirty on the inside. Yes, a vending machine that wants to violate you with her tentacles at first sight and throughout the game hits on you and fulfills your every desire. Yeah. This suggests a world in which everyone is so obsessed with scientific progress that they do not consider the human cost. In the United States, unemployment is rising due to the robots from the USSR. The tour guides of Facility 8426 are also being replaced by robots. Even research and the artistic pursuits are being performed by robots such as the ballerinas. And yes, it is suggested that some of them are used for adult entertainment as well. Aside from those disturbing elements, there is also a less obvious part at play. There is a lot of divergent opinions about communism. One of them is that their ideals are untenable. However, some believe that automation and technology could make a communist-inspired system inevitable. For example, universal basic income has been proposed to counter the ever-increasing automation while stimulating domestic production and purchasing power. This is the seductive nature of technology and ideology. Collective 2.0 is not just a form of transhumanism, it's a combination of the communist ideal with technology. For the duration of the Soviet Union, the party attempted to create the Soviet Superman. Unlike the racially pure Aryan, the Soviet Superman was a hard-working citizen who was ideologically pure and altruistic to the point he would sacrifice himself at the drop of a hat for the cause. Unfortunately, the party never got the people to live up to their ideals. They pretend to pay and we pretend to work was a common joke among the Soviet proletariat, and with the Western world right across the border, the party had to build a so-called Iron Curtain to stop its population from leaving. In that regard, robots are the ideal Soviet worker, which in Atomic Heart they have an ample supply. But what about the human population? For that, they created Collective 2.0, the final stage of the communist society made possible through technology. Of course, the promise is that all humans will be connected, having information drifting around in the system, creating a perfect democracy in which humans can make informed decisions free from ideological bias. I'm sure. Suffice it to say, not all Soviet subjects would be that eager to plug themselves into a hive mind in which free will and privacy are, well, non-existent. Thus they are literally being seduced by robots serving them drinks and giving them artistic performances. These demonstrations of technological marvels make people comfortable with a world where every machine does its bidding without fail. So, on the day that Collective 2.0 is launched, they are all completely on board with this new technocratic utopia, and that is all that matters. So, how are all these themes in Atomic Heart concluded? Well, we don't know, as the first game ended on a cliffhanger to make us buy the DLC. Well done, Mudfish. This is a shame, because I would like to see where they intended to take this. There are references to Slavic mythology, for example. Now, I'm not from Eastern Europe, so I'm sure there's a lot of references I've missed or did not understand, which is one of the themes of Bound for the Styx, by the way. Wink, wink. Take Granny Xena, who is this story's Baba Yaga, a witch from mythology and morality tales. Sometimes she's an evil witch tricking people, other times she's an avenger of the virtuous. Xena is not only an ass-kicking babushka, but also has a flying house and a pet robot that resembles Baba Yaga's house on legs. She even has a robot you can chase around in her room. There are also references to Eastern European cinema in its more psychedelic sequences. But due to the story being incomplete, this all leads to nothing. In this retro future, what is going to be left for humanity? I don't know what they have planned for the DLC, because it has been suggested they do not continue the story. I hope that isn't true, because the ending was quite bad and it also hasn't fully explored the themes they set up. And that fact that the ballerina robot's programming was based on P3's deceased wife did suggest I might get to play one of those ballerinas, which I assume will take place in Baba Yaga-esque fashion. We'll have to see. Overall, I think Atomic Heart has a lot of interesting ideas, let down by a terrible ending of the main game and possible gameplay. And with that, I hope you found this interesting, and hopefully this will help you in your own world building pursuits. If you enjoy our content, please like, comment and subscribe, and don't forget to check out our Kickstarter. This will not only help us improve our videos, but will also help our community, and of course will allow me to make more videos with original art. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna bid you adieu, and as always, make things your way. Good night.